So Andrew, thank you very much for the time this evening. I appreciate you coming online and having a natter. You and I have been trying to get together to have a chat for a couple of weeks, and with me being out the country and other bits and bobs. So I appreciate you putting time aside this evening. For those of you that have never seen Andrew's face, you're obviously not tuning in to Let's Drone Out, which is a podcast that Andrew appears on very regularly. If you do watch Let's Drone Out, you'll be confused because you think this guy's called Frank, but actually his real name is Andrew. Everyone calls him Frank on the podcast. But what a lot of people don't know is that Andrew is actually the person behind some of the big drone events here in the UK. So things like the mini air show that was held down, was it Popham Airfield? Is that the one?
Popham Airfield, yes.
Popham Airfield.
By Mitchell Lever. Yeah.
Yeah, that went along to that, had a fantastic time, and that's an annual event. And Andrew also organises things like that as well. And he's a hobbyist just like me, but Andrew's been very involved, particularly in keeping track of all the legislation and the changes that are happening in the hobby. So he's very kindly agreed to come along tonight so I can have a chat with him and just talk about what the legislation is, what it means, what's just happened at the end of July here in the UK, how it affects us as pilots, and also then look out to the rest of the changes that are currently scheduled to happen in 2019, because there's quite a few things changing. There's talks about registration and all kind of stuff, and there's also an extra couple of things I want to talk to him about while we've got Andrew and pick his brains about some of the latest videos from people like Simon Dale, because there's additional consultation things happened as well. So if you're not in the UK, this is probably going to be really boring, and you can dive out right now and you can get back to go and do something less boring instead. What I'd like to do is hand over to Andrew. And Andrew, if you could just outlay what changed at the end of July here in the UK at 2018, because it's kind of the first time some of the legislation changed for us as drone pilots here in the UK, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's there's been pressure from a lot of political sides to have some changes in legislation and general movement, because there's been an absolute tidal wave of airprox reports over the past few years. So that's reports by pilots flying manned aircraft that there's been a drone infringing on them in a way that could be dangerous. You know, this number has exploded over the past few years, and so the government have decided that they need to do something about this. At the end of May this year, end of May 2018, there was an amendment to the ANO. So the ANO is the Air Navigation Order, which is the law about everything in the air, from kites and small balloons up to military aircraft and commercial airliners, and everything in between all comes under the ANO. And it was amended at the end of May 2018 for small unmanned aircraft. So that is model aircraft, that's drones, that's anything that flies in the air, is powered and doesn't have someone in it at the time. What came into force at the end of July, so July the 30th, 2018, what came into force was the rule of no flying above 400 feet above the surface. So that is the altitude limit for small unmanned aircraft. That's the sort of blanket limit.
That's not a massive difference though, is it, Andrew? Because to be honest, most of us that were following the drone code, and again, I'm going to put links to everything that we'll talk about in the description, but the drone code was very straightforward. It was don't fly above 400 feet, don't be an idiot. Don't fly within 50 feet of people, pets and property, and don't fly, 50 metres, wasn't it? And don't fly within 150 metres of crowds and built-up areas. And a lot of that was common sense, although having said that, lots of pilots ignored it. So I'm guessing because lots of pilots ignored it, we've ended up with this situation. Is that a fair kind of summary?
So the drone code was a set of guidelines, there's a ice cream van there.
That's right, I've got sirens going this end. It's all live, folks. Apologies, we are recording a Skype chat, essentially.
Yes, the drone code was a set of guidelines for us remote pilots, as they call us, for how to behave in a way that's sensible. So the ANO is the sort of very structured legal requirements of do not endanger an aircraft, do not endanger people, And then the drone code was there as guidelines for this is how we suggest you achieve that.
Right.
And now they have these rules in place so that the police or other enforcement bodies can actually enforce it clearly, because they haven't been able to judge really whether we're flying safely or not. So now with the amendment in place, the idea is that they can then have a strict line where this is what we're allowed to do and this is what we're not allowed to do. So that's why that's kind of come into place.
So is that the only really thing that changed, the 400 feet limit?
There's a few other bits as well. So there's information about flying drones around aerodromes, so protected aerodromes, so that's airports and that's airfields and that sort of thing.
Right.
Just to say that inside a protected aerodrome, they have complete control over the airspace. You don't have to get permission from the CAA for flying there if they've said it's fine. Mm-hmm. If you're flying within a kilometre of the aerodrome boundary, you need to ask both. And if you're flying more than a kilometre away from an aerodrome, then it's all down to the CAA as to whether you're allowed to fly above 400 feet, which sort of has been seen as a bit of a maybe a bad idea, because it's saying essentially if you're flying more than a kilometre away from the the fence line of an airport, you can fly up to 400 feet, which when airliners have a 3-degree slope, that doesn't really work out. So there's still a lot of common sense still to be involved in complying with the rest of the ANO, which is don't do anything dangerous and don't endanger people. So yeah, there is it's all this drawing a line, trying to get rid of these grey areas. And some places they're doing it, some places it may not work very well. So we'll see. I'm sure all of this will be changing over the next year. There's lots more to come. The only other couple of bits that have been put into place already with the ANO amendment earlier this year is they've set up the legislation part for registration. By the 30th of November 2019, we will need to be registered for to be able to fly any drone that's above 250 grams. So that's when that's coming in. They've said in the legislation that the CAA might not be accepting applications until even as late as the 1st of October 2019. So that's the latest they'll be opening whatever registration system they have going.
Right.
So they've got a little bit of time to actually build it. It's going to be issued by the CAA, so they're going to be the people in charge of it. It's going to be there's going to be an application process where we send some sort of information and evidence that we're competent to them. They haven't described what this is. They probably don't know. In fact, we know they don't know because they're asking us, and we'll get onto that in a bit. There's the option for it to be age-based, which the BMFA and FPV UK have said that's not a good idea because of all sorts of reasons.
Yep.
And it might be done by types of aircraft, or it might be done by types of flight. So it might be a case of you're allowed to fly up to 7 kilos of anything, or it might be done by you can fly up to a certain distance from built up areas, or that's all up in the air still. They're still working this stuff out.
Right, fantastic. Because it's amazing looking in some of the forums, reading some of the stuff on the internet, YouTube videos, all kinds of things. A lot of people are talking like a lot of this is already in place. Like we are going to have to register, and this is what happens. And things like if you're part of FPV UK or the BMFA here in the UK, you'll be exempt from registration, which I don't believe myself anyway. I think we'll all end up having to register and write our little pilot number on every craft that we own. I think that's going to be a reality one way or the other. But what you're saying is that a lot of that stuff is still being fleshed out and consulted on at the moment.
Absolutely. So
right.
They've put it into law that it's going to happen somehow, but they haven't actually built the systems. They don't know what it's going to be, apart from they're going to give us each a 10-digit number. And we may have to display that on an aircraft. I'm not even sure about that yet. So it's all very we'll
woolly.
Do something, but we don't know what. So it's going to apply. So we might be classed as remote pilots, whether or not we're flying something that's a model aircraft. just purely there's a receiver and it goes to servos and you have to fly it, or it could be all the way up to an almost completely automatic DJI flight.
Autonomous Pixhawk or DJI based mission planned craft. Okay.
Absolutely. Either way, you'll be classed as a remote pilot. There's also something they're introducing called SUA operators, which is probably more for the commercial side, but it might also be how we deal with parents owning an aircraft and then letting their children fly it. So that might come into play as well for hobbyists. So it's something to be aware of, that you can be a small unmanned aircraft operator even if you don't fly the aircraft yourself.
Okay.
So that's something you might want to be aware of. But yes, now the exemptions. Exemptions has been a big thing for drone pilots, multi-rotor pilots especially. So the UK Model Aircraft Association, so that's the BMFA, that's FPV UK, the Large Model Flying Association, and the Scottish Model Flying Association. I'm pretty sure those are the four big ones. There might be one or two other people in there as well.
Yeah, apologies for anyone that we've just missed.
Yeah, they were caught in a very tight situation coming up to between the end of May and the end of July. They had to find a way of keeping a lot of their pilots happy, because there are model pilots who fly big gliders or who fly big 3D fixed wing. So all the crazy big planes that you see around at air shows. I'm sure we've seen videos of Rotor Riot flying around, big 3D fixed wings. They need to be able to go above 400 feet for a lot of their routines. So the model associations managed to negotiate with the CAA and Department of Transport and all those political bodies to get 1,000-foot exemption. So an extension from the 400 feet that we're all allowed to go to 1,000 feet, and that's for their members to fly fixed wings and helis up to 1,000 feet, and that includes FPV, that includes line of sight.
Right.
But it doesn't include, very specifically, multi-rotors. Anything that has more than one propeller on it that gives it lift is classed as a rotorcraft and is exempt from those exemptions.
Oh dear, all the Chinook scale pilots are going to be unhappy about that, aren't they?
Well, there's the Chinooks, there's the X-Class, the giant drones, there's the tilt rotors. All of these things are now in the grey area. So the UK model associations have said, drones are the bad things. We're not the bad people. We've been flying for years safely. We need to draw a line. They were up against a tight deadline, and this is the line that's being drawn.
No.
I think if you put a flight controller in a fixed wing, that can shoot off into the distance without any issues. If you've got a normal FPV quad flying rate, then you're not gonna accidentally put that anywhere, really. I mean, if you stop flying that, it stops flying as a rule. So I thought that didn't really sit well with me, so I pushed it a bit further, and then they started quoting EU regulations at me and trying to say that was the problem.
Oh dear.
And I did a quick Control F in all the documents they were talking about, and there's nothing about rotors in there. So the EASA regs are some draft regulations that might come out across Europe. It came about sort of early 2015.
Yep, I did some videos on that. I'll put this link in the bottom right hand corner if you want to go and have a look at it. But EASA is kind of old news in terms of what's impacting us here in the UK now.
Yeah, so it went through this whole process of being published and amended and consultations and reviews and everything, and they've ended up with 7 classes of aircraft, 3 classes of flights, a handful of different operator and pilot types, and it's got really segmented because they're trying to reflect a very complex situation. And none of that was about multi-rotors. And there was also, recent video with interviewed on BBC News about a 3D heli crashing into a building site, and then they immediately started talking about the problem of drones. So this was winding me up at this point. FPV UK as well. Simon Dale, who was in the same talks as well. There's a lot of common things that they're both saying, and it's come down to politics and semantics, and we're trying to define a drone, we're trying to define autonomy, we're trying to define model aircraft, and it's just, it came down to it. They had a deadline where they had to get these disciplines safe, and we got chucked out the balloon.
Right. So actually, while we're talking about Simon Dale, let's because I think we've kind of set the scene in terms of where we are and the challenges that we're facing. I know Simon posted a video a couple of weeks ago. I'll put a little insert again in the bottom right hand corner here. Simon Dale, for those of you who don't know, he is one of the proponents working with the government. He's represents FPV UK. Is that right, Andrew?
That's correct. Yeah.
So Simon's been around for a while. Simon very kindly contacted me and let me know that he's just released another video. There is another piece of legislation that's going on at the moment, and I'll put a link to Simon's video at the bottom, where we need, as pilots here in the UK, to go and respond to it. Now in the video, and I'll let you go and watch it, but what he's saying is that the last round of feedback that the government requested about this whole issue here in the UK, only 700 pilots responded. And I think I can tell Simon exactly why it was only 700 pilots responded, because we didn't know about it. So I and Andrew want to get the word out here. In his video, there's all the details. You can go and what you need to do, how you need to complete the questions. All the links are in there. As pilots here in the UK, we have an opportunity, whether you believe in the government and how all this stuff is going to work. I personally would be even more upset if we got to the other side of this and found that there were more and more legislations being put on me as a multi-rotor pilot. So if I took a fixed wing model to the field, I can do one thing with that, but if I pull a multi-rotor out the bag, I have a completely different set of rules. That seems bananas to me, but I think we need to let these people know, and there is currently something going on. I think the deadline for it is the 17th of September. Yep. So we need to get back on that. So please, please, please go and have a look at Simon Dale's video and get on to the representatives of the clubs and the people that Andrew's already talked about, and let them know that throwing drones under the bus is a really dumb idea.
Yeah, so just make it clear that this consultation isn't with the model flying associations. This consultation is with the legislators. So shouting at them about leaving us behind won't get us anywhere. We are actually directly talking to the people who are making the laws. So make sure everything is very constructive. I would suggest.
No swearing, thought out arguments. There is actually examples on Simon's video of how to respond to the questions. In Simon's video, and again, I'm kind of explaining everything that he said, so you might not need to watch as much of it as I said. But he talks about the fact that don't use exactly the same answers, because what will happen then, all the legislators will say, oh well, that's part of the response from FPV UK, and that just counts as one. It gives you the spirit of the answer and the language that they've used, but Simon encourages us in his video to use our own, to answer it for ourselves, but that's just the exemplar that they've got for each of them. So I'm going to spend personally some time over the weekend and answer all those questions, and I think Andrew and I would heartily ask every single person watching this video in the UK that cares about the future of the hobby in the UK to make sure that you are responding, and you're responding constructively to that poll.
Absolutely, definitely. The more people that come along with the same voice and say the same things, we might actually get the message across. If we, particularly if you look at the consultation guidance which has come out from the Model Flying Associations, so that's FPV UK and BMFA and everyone, there has been already, I think, a bit of a realization that they don't want to have us outside the tent. They definitely want us inside the tent, because there's just been a couple of comments on there, particularly saying, specifying that model aircraft includes manually flown quadcopters. So that's quite promising. I think they were pushed into a corner. They still want us to be on their side. So I think if we can get behind them, make sure the rules are written in a sensible way, and take up our own grievances with the model flying associations as a separate thing.
Yeah.
That would be my recommendation, because they have now written up over the past few years they've been holding Goggle Fest. They've been creating the multi-rotor A cert and B cert and the FPV certificates. So there are people in the organisation who
get it.
So if we can all present the same front to the legislation, and we can bicker amongst ourselves as much as we like later on.
Andrew, fantastic. And we've been going now for the best part of about 25 minutes. I just want to say fantastic thank you again. I've learned stuff tonight talking to you, as I always do. I really appreciate it. And again, the links to everybody are going to be below. And the next job, if you've got 5 minutes, is go and watch Simon's video and take it from there. If you found that video useful or like the content, then please hit the like and subscribe button down below. If you want to go the extra step, you can become a Patreon of the Painless 360 channel and help provide support for what I do here. All the videos created here are put into playlists, so if you're interested in a particular topic, have a look at the playlist, and they all are organised in there to make them easier to use. If you're not sure if there's a video for your particular problem or topic you want to know more about, then add Painless 360 to the Google search term that you're interested in, and that should find the video, article or content about the particular thing that you're interested in having a look at.